What's going on, everybody? I hope you are excited because I am excited. This is something I've been wanting to do for a minute, and I said I was going to do it once I had my hands on the third volume of this. This is actually initially supposed to be a Let's review, but I've changed my mind. I feel like there's still more that I can do with trying to convince people to read this series. I know there's a bunch of people that actually read the series, but I feel like this is more of like a cult kind of a following, where like there's a lot of people that actually read this, but it's not big to the point where like a lot of people, are speaking about it. And I feel like it's a series that definitely deserves to have a much bigger audience. And it's kind of a shame that, it's not as talked about as it should be. And I think the reason for it is that it does have the mature sticker slapped on it, and every volume has like explicit that explicit thing that I'll put over here, the parental advisory type of sticker. And I think that's part of the reason. But if this one day were to get an anime, I think it could be a pretty huge series. So I'm not going to say too much in this opening because I want to jump right into it and start showing you panels. This is why you should read. And I've read a pretty nice chunk of this. I think as of this video, it's at like 100 chapters. And by the time this video comes out, it'll probably be even further along. I am like on chapter 80 as of the making of this video. I'm like on chapter 80. I want to just keep it to a why you should read. So we're going to do a quick why you should read about one of my favorite series that is ongoing right now. And this is Dandadan. This is one I've been wanting to do for some time now. The more I've read of Yuki Nobutatsu's Dandadan, the more I craved. This story from the beginning is one massive thrill ride that only seems to stop when it gets to the top. Then it plunges you right back down at 120 miles per hour. The characters are easily the best part of the series, starting with our two leads, Okarun and Momo Ayase. These two seem polar opposites at the start of the tale. Okarun is obsessed with aliens and Momo believes in ghosts. After a squabble at school, each dares the other to spend the night at a place where aliens reportedly visited and where a yokai hangs out. Upon entering each of these places, both characters are greeted by the thing neither believed existed. And this is where things go completely off the rails in 2.5 seconds flat. The setting of Dandadan exists on a bizarre world axis where any strange thing that can happen more than likely will undoubtedly happen. What essentially sets things into motion is Okarun losing his testicles. Yes, that is correct. They are taken by two separate beings. One of them is the yokai that exists within the sewer. The other is unknown. The thing is, in Japan, there's this thing with golden balls, which is like an inside sort of joke. It's like an innuendo, I guess, that makes sense to like Japanese people, and it's referenced in a lot of media within Japan. And that's the play that the story uses, that Okarun has the golden balls and they are used by essentially aliens and yokai. At some point, Okarun fuses with the being that lives in the sewer, and it is up to Momo to keep it under control. She is also essentially undergoing her own spiritual awakening. Okarun and Momo use their awakened abilities to take on alien and spiritual threats, even though Okarun doesn't have full control of his yet, and is almost always overwhelmed by the spirit of the yokai residing within him. The fights in this story are so much fun to watch, including an exorcism performed by a metal band. I'm honestly leaving out a lot too because I don't want to spoil more than I have to. What I will say is, if you consider yourself a fan of chaotic stories, not necessarily dark and brooding, but just stories replete with over-the-top hijinks, this one is for you. This is kind of a spoiler, but it seems more like a one-off than lore, but there is a scene where two of our characters are fighting composers from the past, including Mozart, Beethoven, and Chopin. This story takes two of the unlikeliest people and makes them our leads. This is the new era mystery team. They grow and evolve, but their core inner selves remain the same from chapter 1 to chapter 80, where I currently am. Despite how big the cast of characters grows, and it does grow quite a bit, it never stops being fun. It never loses its momentum. In all the chapters I've read, Yuki Nobutatsu has found ways to keep the story refreshing and exciting. From giant mech fights to an alien invasion, this tale has it all, including several references to other media, manga, TV shows, and film. In a sense, I'm kind of glad I waited to check it out because it gave me the opportunity to binge a massive chunk of this story in one go. Getting to meet and hang out with the plethora of characters presented here has been nothing short of an absolute joy. However, for as fun and carefree as Dandadan can be, it also hits some pretty vicious lows in terms of character arcs. No major spoilers, but there is a scene with a woman who does ballet and her daughter. The woman is indebted, and as repayment for not paying what she owes, her daughter is taken from her. Then she finds solace in another child, one that is not her own, and she protects that child no matter the cost. When I read this section, it legitimately almost brought me to tears. This part has no dialogue at all, and you are only shown images, which allows you to infer what is going on. It was such a wonderful bit of artistry, and I think that was the point where I knew this story had become one of my favorite tales ever. From Momo's grandmother, who is way hotter than she has any right to be, to Momo herself and Okarun, and even a character named Turbo Granny who resides within a Maneki Neko, I cannot find a single flaw within this tale. I'm sure there are inconsistencies if you really want to look for them. It's definitely not going to be for everyone. Pretty early on, there is a near assault that almost single-handedly is the reason for the story being rated mature. Beyond that, I can't think of any other reason for the rating, other than maybe the occasional F-bomb drop once in a blue moon. The artwork is gorgeous. Yuki Nobutatsu knocks it way the hell out of the park with his illustrations and the creatures he comes up with, even borrowing some familiar faces from popular media, including the alien from Aliens. I think this is honestly the best time to get into this story, while it is still only 3 volumes deep. Obviously, it is way further ahead on the Shonen Jump Viz app, but if you are more a fan of the physical volumes, the 2-page spreads for this are amazing. I have no idea how this man is able to keep dropping these chapters week after week for over 100 chapters straight. One thing I will say though is I can't wait to see what comes next, and I hope to see you there as well. Dandadan is one of those series that comes around every so often and just does everything right at every turn and just does not ever slow down. Like, there are moments that, yeah, like the story does kind of wind down, from like the ridiculous breakneck pace, but it's like maybe a couple of chapters, where it isn't just balls to the wall, like just everything that could go wrong is going wrong, and all the characters are just the characters in this story are phenomenal. I think these are some of my favorite characters in a story since like Chainsaw Man, and I love Chainsaw Man. That's one of those series, where like the original cast for Chainsaw Man were some of my favorite, characters of a medium of the manga sphere, if you will. It's like the same deal, with Chainsaw Man, like when you had Aki, Power, and Denji together, like they just brought out the worst in one another, and they were so much fun, when they were together, especially Power and Denji, from Chainsaw Man were some of my favorite characters that could be in a room together. Like they could just you already know that they could entertain themselves for hours on end. And that's how I feel about Dandadan. Like, as of right here, as of volume 3, we haven't been introduced to one of my favorite characters, and I'm not going to spoil who that is or if that person is a man or a woman, but once that character enters the fold, it becomes so much more fun. Because right now, with these first 3, we end up getting what is essentially our leads here, which is Momo, Ayase, and Okarun right over there. And then with volume 2, we are introduced to Aida, who is one of my favorite characters in the story, and I think she actually does become definitely one of my top favorite characters. I was going to say she becomes my favorite character, but I think Okarun is probably my favorite character, just because I love the arc that he goes through. He has one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best character arcs from the beginning of his story to where he's at the part that I'm at. Like with him, I think he has one of the best, character developed roles. And then we meet this girl right here, and since I keep up with it, like I'm on the Viz app and I look at the comments on the Viz app. There's a lot of people that hate her. that hate this girl, but I really do have a thing for her. I think she's a really solid character, especially from where she started to where she is, and for everyone involved. I feel like from where they were at point A, they are not, at point C the same people, even though they do have some of the tendencies. But those are just like ticks now. It's like it's just there, but you don't really think about it anymore because they've come so much into their own and become these complete packages of characters. And I think it's solid writing, the way that he has found a way that Yukinobu Tatsu has found a way to essentially break your heart. Every so many chapters there's just like this scene, every so many chapters, or every arc. I'd rather say that like every arc there's like this one chapter or whatever that does like a character background, and it's so goddamn heartbreaking. I'm not gonna spoil any of it because I don't want to, but there's one with Ida, and I think it's in this volume here, where we get some backstory into her and into this ghost that surrounds her. And I'm not gonna go any further than that about that part. But dude, it was so utterly devastating. I think that was the point. I really do. I think that was the point when I was reading that I realized that Dandadan is possibly one of my favorite mangas ever. Just when I got to that point with Ida and her background and her, backstory and whatnot, and it was so devastating. And then they hit us with it again much later. I'm not going to get into that, obviously, because I don't want to start spoiling things, and I really only want to do this to kind of try to bring more love and attention to a manga that I absolutely adore, and I feel like more people should be on it because it is so good. It's so wonderfully written. It's so beautifully drawn and detailed, and there's so many things that Yuki Nobutatsu, has put into Dandadan that are just wonderful, and it is possibly one of the greatest stories that I've consumed, and I cannot wait to see if there is ever an anime that comes of Dandadan. I really do hope so, because I think it has the potential to become a pretty massive anime. I'm not sure who would do it. It'd probably be Mappa, since Mappa seems to be taking over everything. I just hope it's not Clover, because Clover dropped the ball on Wonder Egg Priority. That started off so great, and then it went absolutely terribly. That's all I have for you. I hope that I have in some way or another convinced you to check out Dandadan if you weren't already reading it. If you weren't already reading Dandadan, I hope that I have in some manner or another helped to convince you to check it out. If you were already reading it, if you're caught up or whatever, I'd love to know your thoughts. Please, no spoilers, and no heavy spoilers for big things that happen. I don't want people that haven't read it to be, spoiled on the thing, and I also don't want to be spoiled as I'm not completely caught up yet. I don't want to be spoiled as to what happens in chapter 90 or 100 or whatever. So I'm even as I do this, I'm being careful with what panels I show from the story as to not give away too much. But that's it. That's all I have for you. I just want to say thank you so much for hanging out with me. It means the absolute world that you have taken time out of your day, out of your busy schedules, to sit down and hang out with me for 20 minutes or however long this video is going to be, to listen to me talk about manga and to ramble like a goofy ass man that I am. To ramble like the goofy ass dude that I am. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. Please enjoy the rest of your days and take care of yourselves until next time that we meet.
By the hands of God, I stand as a wrench between your wheeling cog. Fastening my belt, bracing myself to withstand against all odds. Himself shadow runners, battle ready, murder dogs. Rip the skin off your horses, triumph and smash the sorceress. Lethal forces, the failure of your ambitions is more painful than divorces. Smash your dome piece on the doorway, when the door hits, that's it. Call it quits, zipped up in plastic, cremated, melted like elastic. Dreams don't mean shit, in this life they don't exist.